Hello, and welcome to The Brief Insight, your go to podcast for breaking down the latest trends, research, and policies shaping our world. Whether you're passionate about sustainability, global economics, or emerging innovations, this is where we simplify complex ideas to keep you informed and inspired. If you enjoy what you hear, don't forget to like this episode, subscribe to our channel, and share it with anyone looking for insights that matter. We're here every Monday and Friday, so hit that notification bell to stay updated. Your support helps us grow and continue bringing you sharp, relevant content that sparks conversation. Thank you for tuning into The Brief Insight. Now let's dive into today's topic.
Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Looks like today we're taking a look at the rise of Chinese automakers.
Yeah, seems like a pretty hot topic right now.
It is. And you've given us a ton of material to go through. We've got YouTube videos, articles all about the German auto industry, and even some EV market analysis.
Lots to unpack there.
For sure. But it seems like you're really trying to understand how this whole shift is impacting the industry giants, especially in Germany.
And it's not just the economics of it all either. What's really interesting is how this deep dive brings in the human element, you know?
Yeah, like those street interviews in Munich, right?
Exactly. Hearing from actual people, it really brings those global shifts into perspective.
Totally. Okay, so let's start with Germany, because one of the articles from El País, they didn't hold back. They called their auto industry kaput.
Whoa, that's pretty harsh.
Right. And they use Volkswagen as a prime example, a company that's practically a symbol of German industrial power. They're talking about factory closures, possible job cuts, even pay cuts.
I mean, Volkswagen, that's a big deal.
It is. But the article goes on to say that this whole situation is like way bigger than just one company's problems.
Right, because Germany's economic model has been heavily reliant on cheap energy from Russia and exports to China.
And the war in Ukraine has really messed with both of those things.
Big time.
And to really hammer home how serious things are, the article mentions other iconic German companies that are struggling too.
Oh, like who?
Well, they mentioned ThyssenKrupp, the steel giant, and also Meyer Werft. That's the huge historic shipyard.
Wow, okay, so it's not just Volkswagen then.
Nope. It's like the whole made in Germany thing is maybe losing its shine. The article even uses the word deindustrialization.
Deindustrialization, that's a scary thought.
Yeah, and it goes beyond just business, right? It's almost like Germany's national identity is taking a hit.
Absolutely, and the numbers back that up. The article says that German industrial production has fallen a full 20% below its peak in 2017.
20%? That's huge.
Think about it. Like 1 out of every 5 factories that were operating a few years ago, they're now just silent.
That really paints a picture. It makes you wonder, though, while Germany's going through this crisis, what's happening over in China?
Well, it's not like they're just passively filling the void. It's more like they're leading the charge.
In what way?
An Al Jazeera article points out how fast China is becoming a dominant force in the global auto market, especially with EVs, electric vehicles.
We're talking about those battery-powered cars, right?
Yep, exactly those. And get this. They went from exporting less than 1 million cars before 2020 to actually surpassing Germany in 2023.
Whoa, hold on. They surpassed Germany. That's insane.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild jump.
Just how big was that jump?
The numbers are pretty stark. China exported 4.41 million cars between January and November of 2023, and Germany. They only exported about 3.1 million that whole year.
That is a massive difference.
It is, and I think a lot of it comes down to their early and aggressive investment in electric vehicle technology, They basically saw the future of the industry and started developing their electric mobility industry 20 years ago.
20 years ago. So they really had a long-term plan.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They put a lot of government funding into research and development, building a supply chain around it. It was all very calculated.
So it's not just luck, it's a real strategy. They had a vision and went for it.
Yeah. Exactly. It's like they saw where things were heading while everyone else was still stuck in the past. And they weren't afraid to experiment,
How so?
Well, they created this wide range of EVs, from those little city cars to the big fancy SUVs. They wanted to appeal to all kinds of consumers.
And let's not forget, China has a massive domestic market.
Right.
I mean, they have over 300 million registered vehicles.
Yeah.
To put that in perspective, Germany has just 49 million.
That's a huge difference in potential buyers.
It is. And on top of that, they have a big chunk of the global supply of raw materials for those EV batteries.
Oh, so they've positioned themselves perfectly.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got Germany facing a real crisis, China strategically surging ahead, but then there's this other really important piece of the puzzle. Electric vehicles.
The EVs.
Yeah. Would you say they're the new battleground in the car world?
Definitely. And that's where things get really interesting because this is where we see the biggest difference in approach between those two countries.
We all know EVs are the future, but it seems like German car makers have been kind of slow on the uptake, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
I mean, one article from DW pointed out that not a single German model is in the top 10 best-selling EVs globally.
Ouch.
And get this, a Chinese company, BYD, they outsold Tesla in 2023.
No way.
It's like the tables have completely turned.
They really have. And I think it shows a fundamental difference in how they approach this market. German car makers, they're masters of traditional manufacturing, that's for sure.
Right.
But they haven't been as quick to embrace the software and electronic side of things, and that's crucial for EVs.
And that same article also mentioned the issue of labor costs.
Right, because those are much higher in Germany.
Yeah, things like healthcare and vacation time. Those costs make it tough to compete with companies from countries like China, where those costs are lower.
It's a tricky situation for sure. You've got this clash between social values, like Germany's commitment to worker well-being, and the reality of global competition.
It makes you wonder, can Germany maintain its high standards of living and worker protections while still competing in this global market that's so driven by cost?
It's a tough question, and it's not just the auto industry that's facing it. It's something a lot of developed economies are trying to figure out. And honestly, it's probably something you, as a consumer, think about too, you know?
In what way?
Well, how much are you willing to pay for something that's made ethically and sustainably? That's the real question.
It is. It's not just about cars anymore. It's about our values and how we make decisions in this globalized world.
Exactly. And it's something to keep in mind as we keep going with this deep dive.
Okay, so just to recap, Germany's auto industry is in a crisis, China's surging ahead, and EVs are the new battleground. But what does this all mean for everyday people?
Well, that's where those street interviews from that YouTube video come in. Those interviews from Munich really give us a glimpse into how these global shifts are impacting people's lives.
What stood out to you?
I was really surprised by how much people knew about the rise of Chinese cars. It wasn't just some abstract economic thing, it was something they were seeing and thinking about in their own lives.
Yeah. I was also impressed by how much they knew about different brands and models. And it wasn't just awareness. Some were actually thinking about buying a Chinese car instead of a German one.
Right. Remember that one person who said, it looks good, it's insanely luxurious when you get in, and the price is fantastic, it's great value?
That pretty much sums it all up.
Yeah, it really highlights this tension between practicality and emotion that we see in the car market right now.
In what way?
Well, on one hand, you have the rational appeal of those Chinese cars. They're well made, they've got tons of features, and they're priced really competitively. But then on the other hand, you've got that emotional pull of the German brands. They've always been associated with quality, prestige, and that national pride.
It's like a microcosm of the bigger picture, yeah.
Totally. And that tension between the rational and the emotional, that's something we'll keep exploring as we dive deeper.
It's funny you mentioned that tension between practicality and emotion, because in one of those YouTube videos, someone talked about how their childhood dream was to work in the Chinese car industry.
Wow, that's pretty telling, isn't it?
Right? Like that's such a huge shift from how people used to view Chinese-made products.
It really shows how much things have changed. I mean, just a few years ago, the idea of a Chinese car, actually competing with, let alone surpassing a German car, that would have been unheard of.
Totally. And it really speaks to how much planning and investment China has put into this whole EV market.
Yeah, they've been playing the long game.
Remember that DW article we talked about? How they started developing their electric mobility industry 20 years ago, got government funding, built up their supply chain.
Yeah, they really went all in.
And they didn't just focus on one type of EV either, right? They created all these different options, small city cars, luxury SUVs. They wanted to appeal to everyone.
You really covered all their bases.
And then there's the fact that China has like a massive built-in market advantage.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Over 300 million registered vehicles in China compared to just 49 million in Germany. That's a huge difference in potential buyers.
No kidding.
And on top of that, they control a big chunk of the global supply of raw materials for EV batteries.
So they've got the market and the materials. That's a powerful combination.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what the long-term impact of all that will be.
It's a big question.
For sure. Okay, so switching gears back to Germany for a sec. What are some of the main challenges they're facing beyond just this whole shift to EVs?
Well, that El País article pointed out a few things, how their dependence on cheap energy from Russia backfired and their export-driven economies taking a hit with the global slowdown.
Hmm.
And then there's the issue of those higher labor costs compared to China. It's hard to compete on price when your costs are so much higher.
It seems like you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, a little bit.
I mean, they have these strong social values,
Yeah.
worker protections, but they're also facing this huge pressure to compete in a global market where cost is king.
It's a tough balance, for sure. And it brings up a really important question about the future of work, not just in the auto industry, but across the board.
Yeah.
How do we make sure people have fair wages and good working conditions while still being able to compete in this globalized world?
It's a big question, one that goes way beyond just cars.
Absolutely.
And it's probably something that you, listening right now, think about too.
Oh, definitely.
It's not just some abstract concept. It affects all of us.
For sure. These changes are happening all around us, and it's good to be aware of the bigger picture.
Right. So going back to those street interviews in Munich for a minute, it was really interesting to hear people's different opinions about Chinese cars.
Yeah, it was a real mix of reactions.
Some people were really impressed with the quality and value, while others just couldn't imagine giving up their German brands.
It makes sense, though. Brand loyalty is a powerful thing, especially with something like a car. It's often seen as an extension of yourself, your personality.
But it also shows how quickly things are changing, right? These Chinese brands are coming in with innovative designs, new technology, competitive prices. They're really pushing the German automakers to step up their game.
And that kind of competition is good for everyone in the end.
How so?
Well, it drives innovation, leads to better products, everyone benefits.
That's a good point. So what do you think is going to happen to those classic German cars? The ones that have been status symbols for so long. Will they become like niche products like vintage wines or something? Or will they adapt to this new reality?
It's a good question, and I think German car makers are wrestling with that right now.
Yeah.
One possibility is that they really double down on their strengths, engineering, quality, that brand prestige, and focus on specific markets like luxury cars and high-performance vehicles.
So they could become like the Ferrari or Lamborghini of the EV world.
Exactly. They could leverage their history and expertise to create those really desirable, top-of-the-line vehicles that command a premium price.
So that probably means accepting a smaller slice of the overall market, right?
That's the trade-off, yeah. They'd be targeting a smaller, more exclusive customer base.
Makes sense. So is that the only option, or are there other possibilities?
Well, another scenario is that they really embrace collaboration with Chinese companies. We
Yeah.
saw some examples of that in the DW video. I mean, a lot of Chinese car makers have opened headquarters or research facilities in Munich, right in the heart of the German auto industry.
Wow, so they're really setting up shop there.
Yeah, and some German automakers are actually forming joint ventures with Chinese companies to work on EV technologies together.
So instead of seeing it as a threat, they could see it as an opportunity.
Exactly. They could learn from China's speed and agility in the EV market, tap into their manufacturing capabilities. It could be a win-win.
So it's not necessarily an either situation. There's room for both competition and cooperation.
Right. And it makes sense if you want to be a leader in the global auto industry, you got to be open to working with the best no matter where they're from.
That's a good point. It's a reminder that the future of the car industry, and really the future of a lot of industries, is global.
The lines are getting blurry, and the companies that can adapt will be the ones that thrive.
Right, but it's not just about the companies, is it? It's also about the role the governments play, the policies they put in place.
Oh, absolutely.
Speaking of which, one of the DW articles talked about how the German government's decision to suddenly end EV subsidies in 2023 really shook things up.
Yeah, that was a controversial move.
Some people even say it was a big setback for EV adoption in Germany.
It definitely had an impact. And then you have the whole issue of charging infrastructure, which is another big hurdle for EV adoption.
Right, because even if people want to switch to EVs, they need places to charge them.
Exactly. And Germany, like a lot of other countries, they're still behind in building out that charging network.
So even if they solve the production issues, they still have to deal with the infrastructure side of things.
Yep, it's a multifaceted challenge.
Sounds like Germany has a lot of catching up to do.
They do, but it's not just about catching up. It's about looking ahead, anticipating the next wave of innovation. And that's where things get really interesting.
So Germany's got some work to do. But what about the bigger picture? Where is all this headed? What does the future of the auto industry look like?
Well, there's a lot of buzz about solid-state batteries. One of the DW articles really highlighted their potential. It suggested that they could be a real game changer for EVs.
Yeah, I've heard about those. They're supposed to be way better than the lithium-ion batteries we use now, right?
Exactly. Lighter, safer, and they hold more energy. If German car makers could get a leg up in developing and producing those next-gen batteries, it could give them a real edge.
It makes sense. Whoever controls that technology is going to have a huge advantage.
For sure, it's like the holy grail of EV tech. But it's not just about batteries either. Experts are also talking about hydrogen fuel cells.
Oh, yeah, those have been around for a while, haven't they?
They have, but the technology is advancing rapidly, and they could be a really viable alternative to battery-powered EVs, especially for bigger vehicles, like trucks and buses.
So we might have multiple paths to a cleaner, more sustainable transportation future?
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole thing so exciting. There's so much innovation happening, so many different approaches being explored.
But even with all this potential, there are still a lot of unknowns, right? Like, what about car ownership in the future?
That's a big question mark.
With the shift towards EVs and the rise of ride-sharing and all that self-driving tech,
Yeah.
I mean, will people even need to own cars anymore?
It's a question a lot of people are asking. Will we all be subscribing to self-driving cars, or will people still want to own their own vehicles? It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah, it feels like the whole concept of mobility is changing right before our eyes.
It really is. And it's not just about the tech, it's about how consumer preferences and lifestyles are changing too. People want sustainable options, they want convenience.
They want flexibility, they want affordability.
Exactly. It's a whole new world.
This deep dive has been fascinating, hasn't it? We started by looking at Chinese car companies and the problems Germany's facing, but it's become about so much more than that.
It really has.
We're talking about the future of mobility, the future of work, even the future of the planet.
It's all connected.
It is. And it makes you think about what role we each want to play in shaping that future. It's
Yeah.
not just about watching these trends, it's about making choices.
Absolutely. Every choice we make, whether it's the car we buy or the policies we support, it all adds up.
Well, I think we've covered a lot today. It's been a wild ride from those street interviews in Munich all the way to these global trends. Hopefully you found it as interesting as we have.
It's been great exploring these complex issues with you.
And to you, our listener, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Hopefully it's given you a lot to think about because ultimately the future is in our hands. What will you choose?